So this morning I'm joined by John from St. Vincent's Hospital. He is an expert health and medical grants writer. Now, this is not something that I normally do, but I'm interested to get his perspective on how to get competitive grants in that field. John, good morning.
Good morning, Ben.
So tell me a bit about your experience in getting competitive grants in your space.
So I've been writing grants for about 5.5 years now with a specific research group at St. Vincent's Hospital. From my experience putting these kinds of grants together, some of the easy mistakes that some researchers and companies have is to not have a two-way conversation with their funding body. Sometimes this is not always possible. So for example, with the National Health and Medical Research Council, there is a process where it's extremely objective and you can't get that kind of feedback, and you'd have to spend a long process reading the grant guidelines. But with some of the smaller foundations, for example, Multiple Sclerosis Research Australia, or some of the philanthropic funding bodies, there's actually, it's quite important to develop that two-way conversation to see both whether your project actually fits in with their criteria and their project objectives, and also to just see if that's the kind of research that they do fund. So not having that two-way conversation with that funding body or that funding group is a mistake that some researchers have. So that's kind of a tip one.
So have you seen any experience where people have gotten grants without having that two-way dialogue, especially in your space?
Look, it still happens. The experience that a lot of researchers and organizations have is they just feel like it's a brick wall with these competitive grants. And certainly as a grant writer myself, as I started the role, the success rates can be quite depressing. You might see something like between 10 and 20% success rates. The National Health and Medical Research Council, their project grant success rates have floated around 12 and 16%. And if you imagine, spending a month or 2 months preparing and crafting a very competitive application and having that whole month's worth of effort, kind of almost thrown into the bin, it's a very, very depressing and demotivating process. So, and what some organizations, researchers make the mistake of is they apply for the most competitive areas. Accelerating commercialization, it's got a long running track record and it's very well publicized. And some of those programs are actually, you're competing with the best, and that's why your success rates can be quite low as well. So if you develop a long running track record with a small philanthropic organization that funds specifically in your area, and you get some small grants first, for example, a travel grant, an incubator grant, a pilot grant, and some of these grants can be established without any sort of two-way conversation, without any sort of relationship building. Then they will know you and they'll have a trust established with you. And so when you do apply for the $100,000, $200,000, $500,000 grants with them, when you write your acquittal reports, they know that you've performed based on their previous grants, and they're going to trust you with that $100,000, $200,000. But it's similar to venture capital. You go to a networking evening, someone's not going to give you $1 million after meeting you at one networking evening. They give money to their friends, and they might first meet you a year or 2 years ago, and your friendship might develop after several years. So it's a similar kind of thing, building that trust, building that two-way relationship. And I think I've seen that where people have gotten $500,000, $1 million grants from these organizations is when they have that two-way conversation, they've got that two-way relationship established.
Excellent. That's a great insight. So obviously the second part to that is that starting small, getting smaller grants, getting that track record with them, and they become comfortable with you. You show a good performance, and you're very, very low risk. They're happy to give you more money again. Is that sort of a good summary?
Yeah, essentially. The other component is the system is not as broken as people. There are some skeptics out there who believe the system is rigged, that there are people at the higher levels that are controlling and pulling the strings. It's not as rigged as people think it is, but there is a certain level of bias. The field that I'm working in medical research with the Medical Research Future Fund, there's $2 billion being doled out every year from the $20 billion trust fund that's being developed. And it's quite often sold as a priority-driven research. So it's kind of, there's a little clause there, priority-driven. And how that priority is actually developed is through, lobby groups, through discussions and meetings with the ministries of health and things like that, with, very high-level, C-level people in hospitals and high-level professors and things like that. But there is always money left over from those schemes to go towards really good projects and really good applications. And I had quite a long conversation with the Research Strategic Office. And as we went through the successful grant winners, you actually saw some really tiny players in there who got, they might have got $100,000, $300,000. And then you would see some big players that had a really, really generic project that received $1 million. There was no way that, this little team in the middle at some university in the middle of nowhere in some rural area had the lobby power to have gotten the strings pulled to have won that award. So the system is not as broken as people think it is. There is still money up for grabs for people with great ideas and great track records and grant applications.
Excellent. So I guess in summary, so the tips are get that relationship with the funding bodies and start small, get some successes, and then it'll help you get the bigger and better grants.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. John, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Ben.